Hello, listeners. If you've enjoyed these narrations, please click on that like and subscribe button. On a road trip finding murder victims, only stopping for a few hours at awful hotels and eating greasy fast food is not my idea of a vacation. In order to take some time off from my job, I faked a family emergency and then dipped into my vacation time. My boss called to check up on me, asking if everything was alright and if I was enjoying some time off. I wasn't officially on the case and couldn't tell him I was driving around with an honest-to-God necromancer, telling my boss some lies to get him off the phone as I met back up with Neff. He was shoving a mountain of burgers into his face. I can barely stomach greasy fries at this point, let alone a full meal. He must have a stomach of steel. We found the next gravesite, but ran into some troubles immediately. It was along a very popular hiking and camping area. The woods had a steady stream of people along the entrance. Neff vaguely knew where the body was buried, but needed the zombie to guide him to the right spot. Well, with the zombie, a walking dead body, we can't exactly just walk in the middle of an inhabited area. He looked in rough shape and smelled horrible from spending days in a hot car trunk. We couldn't risk anyone seeing, let alone smelling him. We had to come back to the woods at night. Once we found the gravesite, we can stash the zombie in the trunk and away from any unsuspecting campers from stumbling on our undead guide. We followed the plan and found the site in the dark. It looked just like a normal clearing in the woods, apart from a large X spray painted on a rock. I shuddered when my flashlight beam shone on it. I knew there was a body buried there. Even after getting tangled up with the Necromancer, seeing a zombie walking around and uncovering some bones, I still got a chill thinking about the dead waiting to be found. My stomach was tied up in knots, and it was not from my terrible diet for the past few days. Neff left me in the clearing alone to clear the site as he took the zombie back to the car. I had about an hour or so until sunrise. We needed to find the site at night, but Neff didn't want to dig just yet in case I didn't see what I was going for and damage the body with my shovel. This was not the proper process, but we should really do our best to limit the damage to the crime scene. I waited in the dark woods, skin crawling, listening to the sounds around me. Even normal forest sounds could be threatening when you were alone in the dark near a grave. I just wanted the sun to come up and us to finish our task to get the hell out of here. That's when I heard the sounds of twigs snapping, and it made me jump. I shone my flashlight over trying to see if Neff was the one making the sound. I was positive I heard the sound and wasn't just being paranoid. I was hearing someone walking around in the trees. Mentally, I chided myself. We were in an area with people camping. Someone might have left their tent to go for a washroom run, and I could be scaring them just as much as they're scaring me. My hands started to sweat as I kept moving my flashlight around, trying to see who was walking just beyond the trees. Soon, the footsteps stopped. My heart was beating so loud I thought it was going to burst. I sensed something behind me. It was hard to explain, but I didn't hear anything. I just knew that something was now at my back. Turning on my heel so fast I nearly twisted it, I looked at a large rock behind me. Now sitting on top, above the large painted X, was something that nearly made me turn and run. A small object looking like a stick, made of what I assumed to be small bones, tied to a star that was also made of bones. I had seen the Blair Witch and knew stick men charms was bad news. Taking one step back, without removing my eyes off the thing, I started going towards the edge of the clearing. Strong hands grabbed my shoulders from behind, and I screamed very similarly to a little frightened girl, and dropped my flashlight as I swung around, trying to get free of those hands. A loud cackling laugh frightened me more until I recognized it. Neff was behind me, doubling over in laughter so hard he sounded like he was choking. I felt my face turn red in the dark. Unable to control my rage, I started to kick at his shins, expressing how I felt about him sneaking up behind me and grabbing me like that. He dodged only to trip over his own feet, falling to the ground, still cackling. He could choke to death on his own laughter for all I cared. "You're a complete ass," I hissed at him. I walked over to the rock, grabbing the stick man and tossing it at him. "Shit like this? Man, this isn't funny." I was fuming. It took him a while, but he finally recovered enough to sit up with the charm in his hand. He rubbed at his eyes, looking at the stick man.
"Valak was here. He told me you finished our request and wanted to leave you a gift as an apology for nearly killing you. He's really shy, so when you almost saw him, he kind of panicked."
Shy? That massive, terrifying wolf creature was shy? I took back the charm, looking it over. It may be a gift, but it still gave me the creeps. "What is this for?" I asked, looking at the creepy thing.
"It's a good luck charm. It absorbs all your bad luck, and after a few days, you should burn it, and it'll burn away all the bad luck you took in. If you wait too long, however, the charm might take in too much, and it'll break, spilling all that bad luck onto you,"
Neff explained. I turned it over in my hand, wondering what made Valak think I needed such a thing. I couldn't help but feel I was already lucky. I stumbled into someone who was already close to these cold cases and was willing to help me out. I tucked the charm away, reminding myself to burn it tomorrow night. "Neff, why are you here? You've invested so much time and energy into this. Finding these girls is my job. But for you," I asked. We still had plenty of time until sunrise and until we could start digging. I couldn't help but ask a question that had been bothering me for a while.
"Oh, you're my type."
"No, seriously, Neff." He looked at me in the dim flashlight beam. He had his sunglasses off, and I could see his red eyes looking off into the distance, trying to decide on something. He finally looked back at me with an expression on his face I couldn't place.
You showed up at a good time. I've got nothing going on right now. The gate's closed, the deep creatures are peacefully asleep, and I'm not needed to keep the world balanced. I used up a lot of my strength recently, and I'm pretty weak right now. I should be resting though, considering how easy it would be to kill me. I guess I'm just tired of dealing with the end of the world stuff. Doing a simple job with some nice eye candy isn't bad, every once in a while.
I would let the eye candy comment go because I could tell it was him being honest with me. I also knew if I pressed him, asking him about any of these things he mentioned, I wouldn't get an actual answer. Anything called the deep creatures is well beyond my pay grade. The end of the world stuff was not for me. As the hours passed by, I tried asking him some other questions, attempting to get any more facts about himself. I was shot down, and Neff was done being honest and sharing. It was a bit of a mystery and wanted to stay like that. When the sun rose, I stopped talking and went straight into digging. Yet another grave. This one deeper than the others. I'd gotten a bit skilled at digging the past few days. Even though it was deeper, it didn't take me as long as I thought. I had barely started to warm up when Neff stopped me and did the process of looking in the dirt to find another skull looking back at us. He took the photo and called his large crow Carl this time, but he did not send Carl away. Instead, he looked over at me.
"This is Mary, the girl from your case. I want to delay sending the photo to the local police though, until we're done finding all these graves. Now, I have a feeling we only have one more after this. Her killer buried her with her own wallet. With that found, you'll be called in and unable to be free to find the last site."
Neff explained, his large bird perched on his arm flapping its wings to adjust itself. I nodded while looking over at where I'd just dug. I didn't want to leave her. It made me feel sick knowing she was going to be still in this ground and not brought home for a little while longer. But for the sake of another girl somewhere, I needed to leave Mary here alone. Just then I was starting to think I wasn't cut out for my job. I could handle being a detective in a small town where nothing happened, If working in a larger town, and this was my day-to-day life though, seeing bodies, I just couldn't do it. Neff told Carl to deliver the photo later, and he guided me back to the car. I was ready to sit down, get washed up and find the last site. I just wanted this to be over with. When Neff got to the car, he didn't get inside. Instead, he leaned against it looking over at the early birds arriving on the hiking trail.
I've held back some important information. With these sites being discovered, you'll hear the news soon. I didn't want you to be so extra stressed. You needed to be able to deal with what we're doing. And no offense, you're cute little country boy playing detective. I like that about you. So small and pure, acting like a tough grown man.
I punched his arm. It was a reflex at this point. Lay it on me. If I can handle being around you, I can handle whatever you're going to tell me.
The first grave site you dug up, there wasn't one body. There was 4.
Neff said in a low tone. My entire body prickled and felt cold, tears suddenly starting to sting my eyes when I blinked them away. 4 bodies. 4 girls buried away for that long. Neff was right. I felt sick and didn't want to do this or think about this anymore.
The site with the fragments was only one girl. It was a rush job, and that's why she was buried so poorly and an animal got to her. This site, however, has 6 bodies. Mary was not alone all these years.
I don't know how Neff could give me the news so coldly. He was talking about double-digit murder victims, but it sounded like he was just telling me the weather. I turned away from him, my stomach empty, but still felt like I was going to be sick. I hunched over, head down, hands on my knees, trying to understand why he just said 11 girls. So many loved ones hurt and waiting, all because of one evil man. And he was evil. I knew that for certain in that moment. I looked over in the direction of the truck and where we stored the walking corpse. I've never hated anything or anyone in my entire life until now. I hated that man for taking so many lives, for hurting so many people. I was glad he died. Someday, he would be forgotten, his name never to be repeated. I swore right then and there that I would never use his name to try and speed up the process of having time erase him from this world. When I felt better, I straightened up and looked behind me to see Neff with his arms open. He wiggled his fingers, beckoning me to go to him for an embrace. I ignored him and got into the car. One more site to go. Neff was right. It was harder going towards a grave when you knew how many bodies were waiting instead of just one. I refused to stay at a motel and wanted us to stay on the road and keep going. Neff could just have to deal with me being dirty for another day or so. Aside from bathroom breaks, we didn't stop. We drove into farm country. Corn and cow fields flew by. Both my cell phone and radio no longer having signal. We truly were in the middle of nowhere. A perfect place for forgotten bodies. Because there were so few people, we could take our zombie god out without any worries. I now had another reason to feel sick when I looked at him. The car got stuck a few times along a dirt and bumpy road until Neff finally parked and made us all get out. One last trip, and one last sight. Neff could sense how I was feeling, and wisely didn't attempt to flirt. In fact, he was acting a bit different than the past days. He gave me the silent treatment before, after I puked on his shirt, but this was colder. He seemed tense. There was a chance the idea of finding so many victims were getting to him as well, I thought. He was carrying the shovel, and I followed behind him. We found ourselves in an overgrown field. At some point in the past, the field looked to be part of some farmlands before the owner just gave up on it. I reached for the shovel to start digging, but Neff walked out of my reach. He paced around, finding a spot. To my shock, he started to dig. He refused so many times, it was a waste of breath to ask. And yet, there he was, completely focused on his task, the hot sun not bothering him as he shoveled away dirt in such a perfect pace, giving him a day and he might dig halfway to the earth's core. I let him work, not speaking to him, feeling as if this was something he needed to do. It didn't take long, but he uncovered a grave, a small bundle of fabric that made my throat close. It was so small. I feared to cut the victim up before burying her. Brushing away dirt, he revealed another small fabric bundle beside the first one, but it didn't uncover them. Neff just looked down with a strange expression on his face. He looked almost sad at what he was looking at. I wanted to get his attention, to make him look away from the sight, but no words could come to mind, no words flowing out of my mouth. There was really nothing I could say in that moment. Still, I opened my mouth to say his name when a loud crack rang through the air. I jumped at the sound as more rang off. I knew what gunshots were. Some sort of hunting rifle sounded close by. I grew up where hunting was common, so I knew what that sound was. I looked behind me trying to see where the first shot came from, then forced my eyes back at Neff, telling him to get out from the open. My heart stopped when I saw it was far too late. His sunglasses exploded from his face at the second shot that came. I was in such a state of shock seeing my friend collapse to the ground that I didn't even register that I was in danger as well. When my body did move, it was to make the stupidest choice of running to him. I should have left him and ran for cover. I should have grabbed the shovel for some sort of weapon. I should have done literally anything but run over to Neff to haul him into my arms to see his damaged face, spilling with blood all over my clothes. I just couldn't accept he was hurt. My mind just snapped, thinking if I could just get him out of there, everything would be fine. It was Neff after all. He could raise the dead. It was impossible a bullet, or even two, to the face would kill him. Hooking my arms under his now limp body, I tried to drag him away. Fast footsteps came running up behind me, and I was far too late to move out of the way as somebody hit me in the head hard from behind, hard enough to knock me out. I woke up, head pounding and feeling like a weight of 1,000 pounds. Everything hurt and felt too heavy to move. I've felt I had such pain before. For a few minutes the pain was so much I had forgotten about everything. Soon the horrible memories came rushing back. I jerked my head up to look around, shouting out Neff's name, trying to find him. My arms and legs were taped tightly to a chair. I struggled to get free while darting my heavy head around looking, trying to take in my surroundings. It looked like a run-down, old wooden chair. Signs of someone living there were scattered around. It smelled musty and old. In the dim light, my eyes landed on two figures on the floor. One was the zombie, now not moving and looking just as dead as when we first dug him up. The other was my friend. Dried blood over his face, his one eye completely destroyed, while the other staring over at me, and yet not seeing anything. "Neff, no!" My voice cracked as I yelled for him. I couldn't control myself or even think. I didn't care if the person who did all of this could hear me. I just needed to get the hell out of there and get to my friend. While I was struggling, I wasn't paying attention as a man entered the small room. He was dirty and looked homeless. Rifle over one shoulder, he came to me, swinging the butt of the gun into my face, scrambling my brain for a few seconds. "Who the hell are you two? And how did you find those bodies?" He yelled, sounding as stressed as I felt. My head was swimming. Nothing made sense. Who the hell was this guy? Why did he shoot at us? And why wasn't Neff just getting up and taking care of this? He wasn't human. He couldn't be. I know a bullet to the face couldn't kill him. It can't. I had to push the thoughts of my friend from my mind, at least for a few minutes, to figure out who this man was. He paced around looking strung out and on something. He was muttering to himself while looking over in my direction. Suddenly, the thought snapped in my brain. "Your dead partner told us," I replied, voice sounding hoarse. He froze. eyes wide in fear, and looked at the dead man we brought along, then back at me. For my answer, he punched me in the face again, starting to shake the chair. "The dead don't talk! Who the hell are you?" he screamed, his rancid breath nearly making me sick again. "It's the truth. That man you shot, he's a necromancer. He'll be back any second now, and he'll set you straight." I hoped to sound confident, or at least somewhat threatening. The man stopped shaking me. He stared at me, trying to see if I was lying or not. Slowly, he let me go and started towards Neff's body. To my horror, he took his rifle off his shoulder and shot Neff a few more times for good measure. I strained against the chair, but in my bonds they were too tight. "There. Now I'll ask you again before I kill you too. How did you find the bodies? I never told anyone, and he never told anyone about me. How did you know?" Tears coming to my eyes. I wanted to force them down and handle this. I was a grown man, for God's sake. I should be able to handle this. At least now I knew who this man was. At some point, him and the other killer joined up. It wasn't unheard of, and for some reason, when the one of them were caught, neither ratted each other out. The one man died in prison while the other was left to be free and continue killing. But I didn't understand how Neff didn't know about this man. Did he know and think the partner was dead already? Or moved on and wasn't a threat? He hinted before that he could see how the woman was murdered. If he had access to those kinds of memories, surely he would have seen if there was a second person. "I told you already. He's a necromancer." I was in poor state. Any kind of fight left in me had left, and I knew I was about to die. I couldn't get free, and my friend was surely dead. This man just needed to shoot me once and it was all over. Instead, he hit me again and again, this time breaking my nose, blood pouring down my face, but I refused to cry out in pain. "That's it. I'll just bury you along with those little girls you tried so hard to find and get the hell out of here." He sounded strangely calm as he leveled the rifle right in front of my face. At this distance, there was no question of him missing. I was a second away from death before a tremor hit the house. Everything shook and rattled while thunder sound came from outside. It made him drop his rifle in fear and look around. I've never been through an earthquake before and was very confused on what was just happening. As the shaking stopped, he went to pick up his weapon. Before his hand could reach it, his entire body was kicked away and well across the room, slamming hard against the wall. To my immense relief, Neff stood in front of my face, healed. I didn't question how he was alive or even what was happening. I was just glad he was alive and standing. He wasted no time tearing the tape away and getting me out of the chair. "Christ, Neff, do you have any idea how worried I was about you?" I snapped at him. I expected him to give me a flirty answer back, or, well, even look at me. But he kept his eyes cold and his task of freeing me. When I was standing, he took my chin roughly to look me over.
"Let me take care of this."
He didn't even sound like himself. Did the bullet do some damage to his brain after all? I let out a yell of surprise when he ripped my shirt open with one hand, keeping my head placed against his chin. I used all my strength trying to pry his hands off of me, but his grip was like a vice. "Neff, what the hell?" I demanded, to get no answers. I planted my feet down, but it didn't do anything. "Wait, we need to get this guy tied down, or something. He killed those girls along with the others. Neff, come on. Let's go back and deal with this." He kept dragging me along, not looking over at me. It scared me. Deep down, I felt like if I didn't get him to talk, something awful was going to happen. I was dragging along out of the rundown cabin into a grassy field, trying to dig my feet into the ground. He finally stopped a few feet out of the cabin. He let go of me, and my arm did not turn to face me.
"You are going to leave. Go back to your life. We never met. You have nothing to do with this, and I will deal with him in my own way.
Neff answered, his tone chilling my blood even while in the hot sun. Deep down, I knew what he meant by his own way. Neff wasn't human. That man wasn't just going to be killed. Neff could torture him in ways my mind couldn't even imagine. For what that bastard had done, I almost wanted to let him go through with it. But I hated how Neff was acting. This wasn't him. If he went down this road, he would lose a part of himself. I knew that much to be true. Neff, we're taking him in so he can be judged for his crimes. I may not be a good detective, but I'm still a man of the law. I can't let you kill him, I said, sternly standing my ground. Neff looked over his shoulder at me. When his intimidating look didn't faze me, he finally turned to look down at me.
More. That last grave was for children.
My hand shook and bile came to my throat. Those small fragment bundles weren't because of the bodies being cut up. I understood why Neff was so deeply angry. He also saw what those two did and how many were in the grave. If anyone deserved to be tortured, that man did, but Neff didn't deserve to be the one to carry it out. I still have to follow the law, Neff. He needs to be in the court for... Suddenly, Neff snapped, his red eyes blazing. He felt taller, and the sun around us dimmed. His teeth became sharper, and his hands curled, looking like claws.
I'm not human. I have seen his crimes, and I have judged him guilty. This man will be erased from history in the most painful way possible.
He didn't even sound human anymore. The person I considered to be a friend was becoming something else. Dark and threatening, he growled down at me, and I felt so small in that moment. Still, I need to get through to him somehow. It's not your place. You can't take this away from the families of... Again, he cut me off, his face twisted into something, and the ground started to rumble under my feet. His face grew so dark in the sudden lack of light around us, I could only see his red eyes and snarling mouth.
Why should they get sense of closure when I never did? If I could not rip apart the men that violated my daughter, I shall tear apart any vile piece of shit I come across. That is what I'm owed. And I don't care if I'm taking that away from anyone else. And these men are getting exactly what they deserve, and I shall not stop until...
The world was dark, shaking from his rage. I knew if he kept going, he would turn into something else. Dark shapes looking and almost like wings started to appear behind him. Neff was powerful, angry, and yet deeply scared. I pushed aside my fear of him. I reached out and pulled him close to me. The world and Neff returned to normal. The sun shone down again as I let him hide his face in my shoulder. If you keep going like this, you won't be able to come back from it, I told him, hands shaking, but I still kept him on his back.
You'll have to go on that date with me if we keep that guy alive and have him arrested.
His voice was muffled, and he was trying to get back to his normal, flirty tone, but it just sounded weak. I'll go the whole 9 yards for you if you would just keep from doing anything stupid. We both let out a weak laugh at my offer. Raising his head, he looked down at me. I really thought I'd gotten through to him, and we were just going to peacefully drag the murderer into the cabin to the local cops. A gunshot came from behind us. Neff pushed me aside and I tripped into the grass. The man was at the cabin door, trying to reload his rifle, but his fingers fumbling. I got up to grab Neff and get the hell out of from where I was standing, inside of an invisible wall separating us though. The man finally got his weapon loaded and fired again. The bullet exploded against the same wall I was banging my fist against, trying to get to my friend. Neff knew this wall was here the entire time. I don't know how or when he created it. No matter how hard I pushed, I couldn't get through. Neff turned to look at me with a hint of regret in his face. He already made his decision. Staying meant becoming a monster. And Neff decided he was staying. I could no longer talk him out of it, but I think he was glad that there was someone who cared about him enough to try. Turning away from me, his body twisted and turned dark. He moved too fast for me to get a good look at what he had become. Whatever he truly looked like, it was dark and sleek, and something no human should ever lay eyes on. The black shape blurred across the grass right towards the dirty man and his rifle. I heard screams as the shape dragged him inside of the cabin, and couldn't do a damn thing about it. I really should have left. After a few hours of trying to get past that damn invisible wall, I turned away to find that car. The sun set when I did find it. Being so exhausted, I just collapsed in the back seat. Neff left behind his mixed CD. The music stayed on for a little while, because it grew on me during the trip. When morning came, I found somewhere to get cleaned up, then drove back to that cabin. I parked the car down the road and waited, then repeated the process for the next 3 days. My boss may be trying to get in contact with me, but I didn't care at this point. The very least I could do is take a friend home. Near sunset on the 3rd day, Neff finally came out of the cabin. I would see him in the dim light where I parked. Getting out of the car, I waited for him to take the long walk down towards me. His clothes were torn and covered in dry blood that appeared as if he had tried to clean it. His hair no longer tied back, sunglasses lost. He lost so much weight in those few days. Weight he could not afford to lose. When he stopped a few steps away, he didn't even look up at me. Along with some pounds, he lost something else in those 3 days. Something he could never regain. His humanity. Holding out a bottle of water for him, he took it in weak, trembling hands. We didn't leave. I just leaned against the car with him, looking at the colors of the sky changing. There were so many questions I wanted to ask. Not a single one felt right to ask, though.
I lost my daughter,
he said finally after taking a few sips from his water. Adopted? I asked carefully.
What do you think? The men who did things to her died in an accident before I got to them. They didn't even feel any pain. They just died. How unfair is that? I was a human a long time ago. I became what I am because of that.
To bring her back?
No. Even then I knew she was never coming back. No matter how much you love someone, death is the end. They don't come back. You can bring back parts of them, hints of what was, but never that person. I couldn't bear seeing parts of her. It's like you find an object that belonged to your deceased loved one, and it just reminds you all over again that they're gone. No, not her. I wanted to bring back parts of the ones who harmed her and make them suffer. I thought even traces of the ones responsible for her death felt my wrath. I would feel something. Instead, I became this. As simple as that.
Again, I was at a loss for words. Nothing I said could help him at this point, no matter how much I wanted to. Come on, Neff. I'll take you home at least. The small gesture was enough for him. He gave me a hint of a smile and got inside the back seat of the car to curl up and sleep for the trip home. We didn't talk much on the way back. Just took turns driving when needed. It was a depressing trip back, to say the least. I knew a case would be ready to be closed when I got back. So many bodies were being found. They finally noticed the grave of the serial killer was robbed, so when I got back I needed to do my best to avert suspicion away from myself for that crime. I would have my hands full. Not at all what I thought I would be dealing with taking over the lead detective role in a sleepy small town. I dropped by Neff's place first. I didn't even check my phone. I knew it was full of messages telling me to get the hell back already. Neff got out and stretched. Neither of us knew how to say goodbye, or what even to say to each other after everything that had happened. So this time, I decided to break the first question. "Are you free next Friday?" I asked him finally.
I might be. Why do you ask?
He said with the same old playful manner coming back. "Let's go out. Dinner and a movie. Let's say 5? A fancy steak place and some rom-com or whatever, your pick. If you play your cards right, I may even put out on the first date." The last part was a lie we both knew. At least it got him to finally smile. I drove off, leaving him to his chickens, and with the promise to see each other again. I was right to assume I was going to be busy. Friday came, and Neff called my office. He knew I was too much on my plate, and we put off the date until things died down a little. A few months passed, and I finally cleared a day. We called each other from time to time, but when I couldn't get in contact with him for a few weeks, a panic started to rise. I drove down to his place to check it out. His rusted, beat-up car remained in the driveway, but it was far too quiet at his place. I ran to the backyard to find it empty of chickens. Their coop still stood, clean as if never ever used. Not even knocking, I opened his unlocked door to start looking through the old farmhouse, and found nothing. Just a dusty, empty house with sparse furniture. It appeared as if no one had ever lived here for years. Maybe Neff never stayed there. He just dropped by and used the backyard for his failed chicken army. I kept looking for him though. Months turned into years. Access to information got better, but I still couldn't find any trace of my old friend. No matter how hard I looked, I knew if he didn't want to be found, I wouldn't come across him. But still, in the back of my mind, I felt that we would meet again. I owed him a date after all. I was positive that someday he would come by to collect on it.